The sun had only just begun to melt into the horizon, casting streaks of gold and crimson across the countryside sky. The air was still, but for the occasional rustle of the tall, dry grass that lined the long, dusty road leading deep into the forgotten corners of a farming village. This was the kind of place untouched by time where people still lived humbly, honestly, and with weather-worn hands that spoke of struggle and survival. Amidst the golden fields, a sleek obsidian black car suddenly jerked to a halt, steam hissing from under the hood, tires crunching to a standstill on the gravel road. Inside the car sat Veronica Ellis, a billionaire entrepreneur from the city flawless. Sharp-dressed and far from her comfort zone, Veronica pounded the steering wheel in frustration. Her perfectly manicured nails clacked against the leather as she muttered, "Unbelievable. Out here, no signal, no reception, no assistant. What is this, the 1800s? She opened the door and stepped out, instantly regretting wearing 6-inch heels into what looked like a different century. Her phone flickered with a red no-service symbol as she held it to the sky, walking a few feet before realizing the road stretched endlessly with no signs of modern life. Just then, slow creaking sound caught her ear. Turning around, she saw an old tractor pulling up from a distance. Its driver, a tall, lean man with deep brown skin, tanned by years under the sun, a straw hat pulled low over his eyes. His clothes were worn but clean, and his presence exuded a quiet, grounded strength. Samuel Beckett, the poor farmer, a widower with a quiet past and a heart as vast as the fields he worked on. He stopped the tractor a few feet away, jumped down with the effortless grace of someone used to physical labor. "Need some help?" "Ma'am?" he asked, his voice a calm, gravelly drawl. Veronica blinked, stunned. His accent was thick, his boots were dusty, and she couldn't remember the last time someone had called her ma'am. Yes," she finally said, brushing dust from her suit jacket. "My car broke down. I'm supposed to be in the city for a very important meeting." Samuel nodded. "Engine overheated. It happens a lot out here. Too much city in a machine. Like that? Mind if I take a look?" Something about his calm demeanor disarmed her. She nodded, stepping aside. I popped the hood and peered in, his rough hands moving with surprising precision. "Yep, radiator's cracked. Can't drive this. Anywhere till it cools off and gets sealed." Veronica folded her arms. "Great. Just great. And there's no Uber in this ... field." Samuel chuckled gently. "You're welcome to come wait at my farm. It's just a mile down that way. Safer than stand in here with coyotes and the dark cumin." Veronica hesitated. She had never relied on anyone, let alone a stranger in overalls. But she was vulnerable, and something in Samuel's eyes, a kindness, a strength, made her nod reluctantly. "Fine. Lead the way." As they walked, Veronica's heels sank into the dirt and rocks. Samuel noticed her struggle and said, "You want to borrow my boots?" She looked at him incredulously, then laughed, a rare sound for her. "I think I'll survive." When they reached the farmhouse, Veronica was surprised. It wasn't large, but it was beautiful in its own way, rusted, sun-worn yet warm. A hand-built porch wrapped around the house, and wind chimes danced gently in the evening breeze. Inside, it smelled like cinnamon and old wood. Samuel offered her water and some stew. She refused at first, but hunger softened her pride as they sat at the wooden kitchen table. She asked, "You live here alone?" Samuel nodded. "Used to be my wife and I. She passed 5 years ago. I got the land, the memories, and the quiet now." Veronica softened. "I'm sorry." He nodded. "Thank you." "And you? What's a woman in diamonds doing driving out in the middle of farmland?" She looked away. "A deal. Land. Expansion. Same as always. I own 3 chains of restaurants. We're looking for new territories." Samuel's brow furrowed. "So you're the one planning to build on the old Morris field?" Veronica's eyes narrowed. "Yes. Why?" Samuel looked her dead in the eye. "That land feeds for families around here. If a mall goes up there, they'll be done for." There was a long silence. Veronica had never considered the human cost of her expansions. She was raised in boardrooms and glass towers where numbers mattered more than names. But Samuel's words hit different. It wasn't a confrontation. It was an invitation to see something beyond the spreadsheets. That night, the power flickered. As a storm rolled in, lightning cracked across the sky, and the rain hammered down. The house trembled slightly, and Veronica found herself sitting by the fireplace as Samuel brought extra blankets. Their conversation deepened. He told her of his life before farming, his dreams, the loss of his wife. She told him about the pressure of building an empire, and the loneliness of always winning but never feeling fulfilled. By morning, the storm had passed, and the car was cooled down. Samuel had patched it as best he could with old farmer tricks. She could now call for a tow truck, but something had shifted. Before leaving, she stood by the car looking at him. "You saved me. You fed me. You listened. I came here trying to take something. And now I feel like I've been given something I didn't even know I needed." Samuel smiled. "Sometimes the land gives more than crops." She paused. "You come to the city sometime? Let me show you my world. I think you might be the only person who could teach me how to fix it." He tipped his hat. "I'll think on it." As her car disappeared down the road, Samuel watched it go not, knowing that this was only the beginning. A month passed like a whisper carried on the wind, but for Veronica Ellis. The memory of that broken-down car and the humble farmer who fixed more than just her vehicle lingered in her thoughts like a quiet fire burning in the background. She was back in the city now, climbing back into the cold marble halls of her high-rise office, where deals were forged, mergers were sealed, and no one ever said ma'am with kindness in their voice. But everything felt different, empty. Her latte was still perfectly made every morning. Her drivers opened every door. Her stock soared. Yet she found herself staring out the window, imagining wheat fields instead of revenue graphs, and wind chimes instead of the hum of boardroom projectors. On a whim she didn't fully understand, she picked up the phone one Thursday morning and dialed a number scribbled on the back of a receipt she'd kept from the day she left Samuel's farm. He'd written it in pencil half, as if he didn't expect her to use it. When he answered, the sound of chickens in the background made her laugh. Samuel Beckett speaking. "It's Veronica Ellis." "Well, I'll be." "Thought. Maybe you got lost in those glass towers." She smiled despite herself. "I might have. That offer to visit my world, does it still stand?" He cleared his throat. "Well, I reckon a deal's a deal." A week later, Samuel stood at the foot of the tallest building in the city, wearing a pressed flannel shirt, clean jeans, and a borrowed pair of shoes. He looked like a fish out of water, but his presence still carried the unshakable calm of someone who had survived storms, real storms, not the corporate kind. Veronica met him at the entrance, her eyes lighting up in a way her staff had never seen. They walked through the chrome lobby together, dozens of eyes watching them, some curious, some judging. She gave him the tour of her empire, the restaurant chains, the boardrooms, the test kitchens. Samuel listened without awe, but with quiet observation. He asked questions that made Veronica's executives shift uncomfortably in their suits. "Why do you throw out so much food at the end of each day? Why are there more lawyers than cooks on your payroll? Why does the word community not appear in your mission statement?" And then came the board meeting. She brought him in as a consultant, though not one of the executives believed that. For a second, Samuel sat silently for most of the presentation, watching as PowerPoints flickered and jargon was thrown around like confetti. When it was his turn to speak, he rose slowly and faced the men and women who managed her billion-dollar empire. "You folks don't have a food problem," he began. "You have a people problem. You've built walls around what you do, and you forgot that those walls keep folks out. Your restaurants don't feed communities, they feed profits. But I've seen what food does when it's shared at a table. Where everyone's welcome, that's real growth. It's real wealth." The silence in the room was louder than applause. A few scoffed, a few smirked, but a precious few sat very, very still. And Veronica? She felt something inside. Her shift again. A ripple. Seed. That night, they sat in her penthouse staring out at the skyline. "I can't explain it," she said. "You make me want to burn everything down and start again." Samuel chuckled. "Maybe don't burn it, just replant it." The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Together, They launched the Reroute project, a pilot initiative that repurposed unused lots in low-income city neighborhoods into urban gardens. Veronica diverted a portion of her profits to fund mobile kitchens, fresh produce delivery trucks, hiring local farmers to teach sustainable methods in schools. At first, the board resisted. Stockholders balked. But when the media caught wind of what she was doing, Anne saw the first smiles on the faces of kids learning to grow carrots in cracked concrete soil. Something changed, headlines read. Billionaire turns empire toward the soil inspired by a farmer. From diamonds to dirt, Veronica Ellis's radical redemption. But with the rise came resistance. Her biggest investor, Maxwell Crane, threatened to pull his shares unless she refocused on expansion and left the philanthropic nonsense behind. He called Samuel a distraction and accused her of losing focus. One night she stood in front of the mirror staring at the woman she used to be. Her eyes were tired but alive. Her heart was heavier, yes, but it beat with purpose. That night, she made the decision that would change her legacy forever. She resigned. She handed control of the corporate board to her most ethical partner, kept only the branches involved in Reroute, and announced a full departure from traditional restaurant franchising. Maxwell stormed out of the press conference, fuming. But Samuel, standing quietly in the wings, nodded with pride. Months passed. Veronica began spending weekends on Samuel's farm, helping him plant, mend fences, and just breathe. She learned how to work the land, learned how to listen. He showed her how the soil never judges, only gives back what you plant. They became partners in business, in growth, and slowly in something more. Then one stormy evening, just like the one when they first met, tragedy struck. A fire broke out in the backfield, sparked by faulty power lines. Samuel rushed out to contain it, and Veronica followed without hesitation. Hours later, soaked in ash and rain, they stood together, bruised but victorious. The fire had taken one barn but spared the crops. She collapsed into his arms, sobbing not out of fear, but out of something deeper. "I never knew what love looked like," she whispered, "until I saw it in how you fight for everything, for the land, for people, for what matters." He looked down at her with those steady eyes. "And I never thought I'd love someone who couldn't tell wheat from weeds, but here we are." They kissed beneath a sky cracked open by lightning and stitched back together by stars. A year later, they were married in that very field, surrounded by families the Reroute project had helped, by neighbors who had once been strangers, and by the distant hum of tractors and laughter. The same executives who had once dismissed Samuel now stood beside him, some of them converted, some of them still learning. Veronica wore no diamonds that day, only a simple white dress, dirt on her hands, and joy on her face, and in the distance, the sign for the newly launched Roots and Table Restauranta, sustainable. Community-run eatery built on the site she once tried to bulldoze, shined in the soft morning sun,